Time for another Indomitus conversion video, and in this one I'm going to convert the Necron Scorpic Lord, and it's coming right up.
Necrons!
Okay, here we go. Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. And if you're new to the channel and you want to learn about Necrons and more, then please subscribe and hit the bell button to turn on all notifications so you don't miss an upload. Right, here we are again converting Necrons, and today it's the Scorpic Lord, potentially the hardest one of the Indomitus box set to convert. Of course, these are push-fit miniatures, and in this series of videos where I'm converting the miniatures from the box set, I'm only using the box set sprues, so no extra parts. So the Scorpic Lord is going to be a challenge, however, I'm very happy with my results. So let's go table down and have a look at my conversion. That failed. That really wasn't very good. Okay, so here is our Scorpic Lord built exactly as the instructions say. I'm now going to build a second one, and I want to make him look a little bit different. Of course, this is a push-fit miniature, which makes the conversion a little bit harder, but to be fair, the thing which makes it really hard is the wires which attach the arms to the back. That means when you're moving the arms around, it's going to be hard to match the wires up. One option, of course, is to remove the wires, which just solves that issue. However, I think the wires do give that extra detail, and it would look rather odd to have one Scorpic Lord with the wires on and one without. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to deal with these arms yet until I start building, but what I have decided is to start with the base, because one way to make the miniatures look different is to have a different base. So what I've done first of all is I've cut everything off of the sprues and I've cleaned up all of the mould lines. I've then gone into the foot, if I can find it, this one here, and in a previous video, a previous conversion, I cut the bottom section of that foot off, and I've actually used that on my Plasmancer conversion, which I've already made a video about. I'll link you up to that at the end of this video. But that straight away is going to make the model look different, and I'm going to put some different basing material at the bottom. I'm going to use one of my Necron rocks, which is basically just a garden rock painted. So that's what I'm going to do for the base, and that will make him look a little bit different to start with. Then we're going to see what else we can do. Okay, so just worked on the other two legs just here. I removed some of the material on the bottom of the feet. However, I've kept the little stumps which attach it to the base, because I think it will just make it a little bit more secure when the model's on the base. So on both of these I just took the bits off that I didn't want and I just reshaped them, so I still have the stump, and each leg is going to look different from the original model. Right, next up, before we put those legs into position onto the body, is I'm going to cut this body so that I can rotate it. Now I've done this on the other conversions as well, and it really does help with the pose. So what we're going to do is get our sharp knife, and we're going to carefully put this into the groove of that body section. We're going to make sure that when we push down we don't damage any of the other sections of the model, and we're going to gently just wiggle our knife. We're going to gradually push through the plastic. I'm just going to move this slightly because I can feel I'm damaging that section. Okay, here we go again. Push that through. The sharper the knife, the easier it will be. There we go. Done. Okay, so I've just cleaned them up slightly with a knife so they're both nice and flat and they match on here nicely. And I've noticed I've got a little air bubble in the middle of this model, which sometimes can happen. That's going to be quite useful, and I'm going to use that as my guidance hole for drilling a little hole in so we can pin the body back together. So I've got my pin vise with a 1mm drill bit in it, and I'm going to use that hole, and I'm going to just gently drill out a hole in both sides of this body. And with that drilled out, I'm going to cut off a bit of a paper clip here, like so, and I'm going to super glue this into one of the holes. I'm not going to do it into both, I'm going to super glue it into one, then I will let it dry. Okay, so that's glued in. I actually glued it into the bottom section rather than the top, and I haven't cut this down yet because I'm going to cut this down later when I decide how I'm going to pose him, just so I've got some manoeuvrability. I might potentially be bending this pin slightly because I plan on maybe angling this top half of the body. But before we do that, I'm going to get the legs and I'm going to glue them into position. Okay, so that is the legs glued together, and I've also been working on the base here. So I've glued some of my Necron rocks on, which I already had painted. Just for reference, these are painted black, and then they're painted Caliban green, and then they're dry brushed with Warpstone green, and then finally with Mute green. That gives me my Necron's effect. Now I actually had to raise this leg up, and when I eventually super glue it on, it will be at the back here, which does mean that these legs are raised off of the ground because, well, it's raised much higher than on the original model, which is going to help with my pose. Now, even though there's a tiny gap here at the bottom, that's going to be fine because I'm going to be filling it with sand, because I'll be putting sand on the base anyway. But it does mean that I now have a slightly different pose on the legs. Not only do they look different because of the material, but this one is angled to one side, whereas this one is straight up. Now, to help the pose further, of course, when I put this body on, I am not only going to twist it, but I'm going to angle it as well. I'm thinking of angling it forward just slightly. Now, the tabard could be a problem, because the tabard actually has a little hole section which goes here, and of course that means if I'm rotating it, well, that's not going to work. So I'm going to have to cut the little nodule off and probably fill the hole with green stuff, allowing me to rotate this round and potentially rotate it forward. Now, having it forward is going to mean that this arm here is going to be in a totally different position, so I don't think I need to convert or change this arm, which would be very useful. And at the moment I'm thinking, how about I try to flip these around, so I have the sword at the top and the gun at the bottom. The sword is not connected by a wire, so that should be easy to do. So that's a possibility. However, I'm going to work on the other bits first. That's the tabard and then the body and the pin, get those into the right position, and then I'll be ready to work on the arms. Now, for the pin, I'm going to get my little pliers and I'm just going to bend the pin in the position that I want, and then of course I'm going to cut it down, and then I'm going to work out the exact position I want to put the body. It's going to be angled, which means there's going to be a little gap, so I'm going to fill that gap with green stuff. If you're not sure what green stuff is, I'll link a video up in the description below for you about green stuff. It tells you all about what it is and how to use it. Okay, so I thought I'd just show you this. So this is currently drying, but what I did is I removed the little tab on the tabard, and then I put the arm here into the body. I didn't glue it, I've just pushed it into place, and I gently pushed the front chest piece into place. Again, not gluing so I can take it apart, but what that did allowed me to put it onto the pin and basically rotate it and get it into position. And now he's looking, that's the legs at the same angle, but if we move them both forward, you can see a massive difference there. Now, of course, once that's dried, I'm going to remove the front section and the arm, and then work on the other two arms just there. I also need to do some green stuff work, both the hole where the tabard goes, and also where there's a join with the pin, of course. So I'll fill that in with green stuff as well, and let that fully dry. But he's looking pretty cool. Now, I am thinking I might also just snip one of these claws off and just angle it down, probably this big front one, and that again just might help the model look a little bit different from the other one, because although the claws are in a different position, you can still see that it's the same claw. So yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to just cut that front one off and just re-glue it in a downward position, just to change it slightly. Okay, so that's the green stuff done, and to be fair, that was pretty simple, just to fill in the little gaps. If you didn't have green stuff, or you didn't want to use green stuff, potentially if you used some Gorilla Super Glue, the gel one, which is quite thick, you could potentially fill the hole with that super glue as an alternative, although the green stuff obviously is a little bit neater. So with that done and drying, I'm going to work on the claw of this. So looking closely at it, there's a little, almost like a ball joint for this front claw, so I'm going to cut this at the back of the ball joint so I can rotate it round on the ball joint and have it facing in a different direction. So it's going to be a bit tricky, but with a little bit of care we should be able to do it. So I'm going to basically get my knife and put it into the correct position and just gently push my knife in and just gradually push the knife until we get all the way through the plastic. Okay, so that's done. I've just got to reshape it slightly, which I'll do with my knife, because obviously we've just cut it with a straight edge. So I'm going to angle it a little bit, and then I'm going to glue it back on in a downward position, and that will really change how the claw looks. Okay, so that's done. I used some super glue to glue that into position, and now it really is going to look like a different claw. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to let everything dry. Of course, this green stuff here is still drying. And then, rather than gluing this into here, I'm going to work on this side first, just so that I've got a bit more room to manoeuvre when it comes to holding, because I might have to do some cutting of plastic here. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll do some more work. Okay, so I've just gently pushed this into place, and it's pretty clear that this little hole here has two little sockets, obviously one for each arm. However, the two arms, obviously where it's push fit, has some extra bits and pieces where they push into the body into a certain position. So the first thing I'm going to do is clip off the push fit sections, and then I'm going to reshape the ends so we end up with two little ball sockets for each one, and then hopefully we can move them around a bit. I'm going to try to put the gun at the bottom. Now these wires, they do bend a little bit, so I think I can get it into position and bend these wires into the holes on the back, and then we can have a look at how we're going to pose the sword. Okay, so I've worked out how I'm going to do this. Now first of all, I've removed the little section here where the push fit arm goes into, and I've just made this little section here flush. And then I'm going to stick the claw in, and then I'm going to stick the body on the top. That's going to be leaving a nice big hole there. Now the gun itself, I've worked out that if I glue it at the back first, obviously the right way, glue it at the back first with the wires, let that fully dry, I'm then going to be able to bend this section into the hole at the bottom, just putting a little bit of pressure on the leads here, but not too much. Once that is in position, I can then put the blade at the top of the hole here as well. Now I may fill this hole with green stuff before I push the bits in. I have to see how it goes. Now the only thing is, with the gun, there's one wire, which is the very small wire just at the top of the arm here, which isn't going to match up, so not really an issue. I'm just going to cut that off, and I'm going to cut this little join off here on the body where that wire goes. So I'm going to cut those off, make them flush as if they weren't there in the first place. Then I'm going to start gluing this bad boy together. Okay, so that's done. I need to be very careful with this because it's still drying. But basically I stuck the claw into place, and then I hooked out some more of the insides where the two arms are going to go. So effectively I just had a cavity. Then I glued this chest plate into position. At the back here I glued the wires into the body using super glue, let that fully dry, and that allowed me to put the joint of the gun into this armpit section here, I had to cut it down slightly more than I originally did, so rather than a whole ball joint, it was like half a ball joint on this one and then half a ball joint on the sword. And then I used some green stuff, I filled the cavity with green stuff, then I used some super glue and I pushed them both into position, got them into a look that I liked, and well, now they are drying. So all I've got left to do now is put the head on, place him on his base, and he's all done. Okay, there you go, there he is, all finished, and I'm absolutely loving this guy. Now, admittedly, this is probably the trickiest conversion so far from the Indomitus box set, but I always knew it would be because, well, this guy has a lot to him. However, I'm very happy that I managed to change the sword and gun arm around and get him into a different position, and compared to the original model where he really does look a lot different, and of course that's using just the Indomitus parts, so there's no extra parts, so well, even better. Of course, I'd love to know what you think of him in the comments box below. It's always great to hear your comments and feedback, and if you want to see some of my other conversion videos from the Indomitus box set, well, check out these videos just there. Beam me up!